I've always found the individual differences between player mentality and sport, regardless of the skill level, to be a really fascinating thing, partly because usually this mentality can almost always be applied to said person in a broader context. It's always something that I try to learn about. What molds a successful athlete, or even just a successful person? Are any types of personalities predisposed to success? Is natural talent really a thing, and how important is it versus hard work? What type of past factors are at play in determining what type of a learner a person will be? What is the consequence of failure? What does victory mean to different people? While there are correlational patterns that can be found with regards to questions like these, the fact is, there are no set rules when it comes to a person's developmental journey through life. When it comes to difficulties and failure, whether it be in sport or otherwise, there are so many variables at play that mold how a person will respond to adversity. And this is an idea that Ping Pong The Animation handles with striking realism and elegance. Masaaki Yuasa's Ping Pong is interesting in that while all of the sports-centric questions that I've just asked are absolutely key to the story, the narrative is easily as much of a coming-of-age tale as it is a sports story. It's an ambitious and really unique series, obviously in its visuals, but also through its storytelling as well, using the really damn cool sport of ping pong as the foundation for the heart of the character-driven story to spring off from. It follows a handful of memorable and really quite deep characters all invested in the sport, but each of which is different from the next when it comes to their motivations for playing and how much is at stake, as well as their feelings towards the game. And this is ping pong's selling point. While the actual games are definitely one of the series' biggest draws, and are exhilarating to witness, for me it was the feelings behind each swing of the racket, the context behind every game, and what each result meant for the characters that kept me blazing through the 11 episodes. It's a poignant and believable story about ambition, talent, hard work, failure, and everything in between. Each major character had such an intricate personality that I would happily watch an anime with any of them as the protagonist. Yet they're all present in this one, and they're all explored so efficiently within the 11 episodes that it's pretty unbelievable. There's Smile, the young man who is a true prodigy, seemingly named as such because he only ever cracks a smile when he plays ping pong, but who has lost his passion for the game and become used to safety within a comfort zone. And there's Peiko, the larger-than-life, exuberant hero who has always been someone that Smile has looked up to. Kong Wenge is a figurehead for the story as well, displaying the tragic consequences involved when someone stakes more than should usually be bet on a sport, though he eventually admirably comes to grips with his life, taking control and finding peace. Kazuma, or Dragon, also offers a different view on ping pong, having a militaristic approach to improving at it. This reflects a very sad state of life, reinforced by his mentality that any defeat is a catastrophe. There are also a few other good characters as well who all differ in their feelings towards the sport, and seeing these characters develop after I became almost immediately invested in their journeys through brilliant characterization was ping pong's biggest draw. But far from being the pseudo-power fantasy that I've gathered a lot of sports anime tend to base their appeal around, ping pong instead focuses on realism. It plays quite a bit with the idea of escapism and the sad truths attached to it. No matter how much fun ping pong is for the characters in this show, the less than ideal aspects of the harsh, real world always make their way into the story. Whether it be in realizing the fact that Kong is literally playing to find his way back to his true home, or in seeing how Kazuma must lock himself in a dark bathroom alone before matches to calm himself down because the ramifications of defeat are so terrifying to him, the somber truths of reality are an ever-present in the story. A common theme tackled in the show is how having this one ultimate thing, in this case the sport of ping pong, as the be-all and end-all is more than often a crutch. And once things aren't going well, as they tend not to at times, the crutch is gone and there's nothing to support you when you fall. Of course, there are real-world exceptions to this, and I can easily name a handful of professional athletes that put all their eggs in one basket due to varying circumstances, but there are only so many people in existence that can be a Lionel Messi or a Cristiano Ronaldo. The sport of ping pong means so much to the people in this story, but it's far from universal in its significance. Just as in the real world, ping pong displays what sport can mean to people in a variety of ways. Some strive to be the best of the best, some play it out of a pure passion and love for the game, and some use ping pong as a means to an end, as an absolute necessity to make ends meet in life. The one commonality here is that reality always rears its head, and that true to life, Both the fear of failure and the consequences of failure shape the landscape of the main cast. The majority of main characters in this show all fail in one way or another, and seeing the different ways in which the dust settled after each character's failure was truly enrapturing, because it really drove home the concept of individual circumstance that is emphasized again and again here. Ideally, failure in anything should result in the individual learning from their mistakes and improving on them, eventually achieving their initial goal. But this just isn't the case sometimes. In this story, a character named Sakuma suffers a crushing defeat and eventually realizes that he just won't ever have the raw skill and technique needed to be great at his passion, no matter how much work he put in, due to circumstances beyond his control. Kong Wenge must find a new way of life in a foreign land because he accepts that his utmost effort was just not good enough, while also learning that he should have lost to a guy who didn't have nearly as much at stake, but just had the necessary natural talent. It's unfair and it's cruel, but it's so very real. However, having said all this, Ping Pong never strays into cynicism or becomes depressing through its primary ideas on failure and narrow-minded ambitions. In fact, it uses these more somber ideas established earlier to then contrast those ideas with positivity and flip the perception of the sport and failure itself by the end of the series. After watching, what I took from the story was that despite how many trials we'll encounter and how many times we'll end up face down in the dirt, the potential is always there for us to find a peace of mind and a happy existence, and often this is achieved through the help of others. Did all of the characters in this show end up where they thought they would? No. Did all of the characters achieve their dreams? Hell no. But all of them persevered and ended up in a good place. Some had to alter their paths, fall back, and settle on a secondary option. Some had to really do a lot of soul-searching and psychological reframing to come to grips with it, and this is far from easy. Some still had regrets even 5 years later. It wasn't perfect. But when all was said and done, our characters found themselves in a good place. It's both interesting and thematically appropriate that the person who ended up winning in the end was Peiko. Peiko is the clear hero of the story, both for what he represents and the effect that he had on the other characters. He was only enabled to reach his initial ultimate goal because his pure raw love and passion for the game meant that in the end, he was not afraid of failing, and actually valued how defeat had helped him embrace this game more than ever before. He hated losing, sure, but he wasn't truly scared of it. He was never afraid to feel. Like everyone else in the story, Peiko experienced failure. He stumbled, he fell, he sunk to the depths, he even quit the game. However, with a rekindling of his spirit, partly thanks to Sakuma, he came back. Peiko values his failures just as much as his wins, and describes his crushing loss to Kong as the instance that taught him how to fly. His honest yearning for ping pong meant that he was someone unshackled and unafraid of stumbling as long as it meant that he could go back to the game that he loved. This was in stark contrast to the boxed-in and safe comfort zone that Smile operated in, despite being every bit as much of a prodigy as Peiko. And only through observing the clear freedom in Peiko's expression for the game were characters like Smile and Kazuma able to find heart again. He was their hero. Was there convenience in the fact that he had the natural talent that was necessary to achieve his goals through his love for the game? Sure, but this refrains from being a convenient plot device because of the countless others who had a passion similar to Peiko's and ended up not achieving their ambitions. And it makes thematic sense because no one was quite as willing to fail as Peiko, and that's why he soars the highest. There's no coincidence that a pair of wings is some of the most prominent imagery in ping pong. At the beginning, a lot of our characters were loners, afraid to fail because of the repercussions, not wanting to welcome the help of others because of the notion that accepting help was a kind of weakness. But at the end, we got a group of individuals who achieved enlightenment and learned about themselves through each other. Through Peiko, Kazuma learns that ping pong can be about more than just success and failure and anxiety. It can be about ecstatic liberation. There's also the obvious point of Peiko leading Smile to self-discovery, but there's also the instances where Smile's brutal honesty helped Sakuma to self-acceptance, where Sakuma himself gave Peiko the push that he needed, and where Wenge learned how to shed his arrogance and entitlement from his matches with Smile, Kazuma, and Peiko. The main message that towers over all of the other themes in this narrative is that everyone will fail, but failure stimulates growth. And through failure, we can eliminate our fear of failure and embrace life like never before. We can truly grow and discover the type of people we are. Defeat is liberation and a new beginning. Above all, that's what hits home and what I admire the most about Ping Pong. It tackles ideas similar to the philosophical concept of self-actualization studied by figures like Rogers and Maslow, which is, to put it in absolute bare-bone terms, the idea that every individual has the capacity and drive to fulfill their potential and understand themselves. But Yuasa's story addresses this concept in a truly relatable way within the context of a realistic world that doesn't shy away from harsh truths. The result is an incredibly uplifting and heartfelt story, and one that was really quite inspirational to me. Ping Pong is a very realistic tale about the harsh world of sport, but it generalizes the messages it communicates about this to a broader context about life in general. Some people just aren't good enough at certain things, and accepting this can be hard when you see others succeeding in something you care so much about without pushing themselves. People like to say that hard work trumps talent when talent doesn't work hard, and this can be true sometimes, but not all the time. It can seem incredibly unfair, but this is what life is, and only through embracing failure and learning from our deficiencies can we really grow and learn about the kind of people that we are. Ping Pong may not believe that achieving one's ultimate dream is always possible, but it shows that people always have the potential to learn and bounce back in multiple ways. You can only fly when you're no longer afraid of falling. One of my favorite scenes from the series was the little Christmas Eve segment that offered a bit of a bleak take on this concept. As the newly adjusted Kong sings about how lonely he is on Christmas Eve, it becomes obvious that he's the only primary character from Ping Pong that actually wasn't. This is because he was the one who had learned to accept both the type of person he was and what life had given to him, and he made peace with it. He had broken down his walls and stepped out of his comfort zone, and the song he sings juxtaposes this situation nicely. But unfortunately, the same happiness can't be said for our other characters, and the irony in this scene is executed beautifully. Smile is given the night off from training to relax, but in the safe comfort zone of his solitude, he finds only desolation. Peiko stumbles around drunk, having seemingly not come to grips with his life and learned to embrace failure, despite his positive philosophy on it. Sakuma is better off psychologically than the other two, but is still adjusting to a life without Ping Pong. Oda has to spend the holiday alone, working just to ensure that he and his family stay afloat. On the Kaio Academy side of things, Sanada spends the night fantasizing over his dream girl, and said dream girl is shunned by Kazuma, who uses this time in unhappy isolation and training, not knowing what he has. This whole thing was a bittersweet little scene that illustrated a snapshot of what each of the characters were going through in the middle of their developmental journey, and it encapsulated a lot of what the series was about. The really intimate nature of Ping Pong's messages, and the boldness with how it pulls off the execution and communication of these themes, all in the package of an awesome sports anime, made it one of my favorites. I learned a lot from taking apart what this story was about, and I even moved it up a few places on my favorites list when reflecting on it, simply because I had forgotten how much it meant to me and how relatable it was. Thanks so much for watching, and hopefully you enjoyed this show as much as I did. Something I'm really curious about with regards to this show, and you guys, is which character from the show can you relate with the most? If you want, leave the answer in the comments, along with your general thoughts on this series. If you liked this video and want to support my ability to make more like it, consider giving it a like, subscribing to my channel, or even checking out my Patreon. As always, I'm available on Twitter or my anime list. But that's all for now, and I'll see you guys soon.